Joining us today. Just wanted to let you know that this meeting will be recorded. You'll all get an acknowledgement of that. My name is Christina, and I use the pronouns she and hers. I wanted to start with a brief land acknowledgement. The University of Arizona sits on the original homelands of the Tohono O'odham and Pascua Yaqui people who have stewarded this land since time immemorial. Aligning with the university's core value of a diverse and inclusive community, it is an institutional responsibility to recognize and acknowledge the people, culture, and history that make up the Wildcat community. At the institutional level, it is important to be proactive in broadening awareness through campus to ensure our students and staff feel represented and valued. We also wanted to acknowledge our mission as a Hispanic serving institution and how that shapes our work with the community around us. And with that, I'll turn it over to Liz.
Thank you, Christina. Also, hello everyone. Thanks for joining us today. My name's Liz and I use the pronoun she and hers. Now let's get right into it. Before we get into the nitty-gritty, we would like to share with you the structure of today's workshop. If you're interested in following along our slides, please go to the Google site using the bit.ly link provided. Christina will also be providing this link via Zoom chat. In addition to the slides being available on the site, we also have a transcript for you to reference. It is provided in spirit of the Universal Design Best Practice. While preparing for this workshop, we've gathered resources to share with you, which is also located on the website. On to the actual structure of the workshop. It will be fast and furious. We have 30 minutes with you all and a lot to cover, with the hopes to sprinkle in some audience engagement at the end. At the end of the workshop, we will also like to be respectful of everyone's time, but model what we are talking about. Thus, we will be around for an optional Q&A and debrief space. The space will take place in a different Zoom room. The link will be provided on our last slide and via Zoom chat at the end of our presentation. Throughout the presentation, we will not have time to answer the questions you all may have, but we encourage you to reach out to us via email. The strategies we discussed today are based on our experience from previous roles and doing research in preparation for this presentation. A little bit about myself. I lead a team of instructional technologists that supports the university. We helped instructors move their content fully online during the spring. In addition to that, I've also led fully remote teams for a nonprofit over 3 years. The nonprofit focused on culture awareness and cultivating leadership skills in young adults. I plan and hosted in-person leadership conferences where I did not meet my team in person until a few days prior to the conference. Thus, a lot of the recommendations provided today have been tested and used successfully. To begin this, here are a few questions for reflection when we think about agency, flexibility, and burnout. What work needs to be done between 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. or synchronously? What are the expectations for the work? Are we encouraging others to take breaks and be human? When we think about flexibility for others, we should consider the work that has to be done. Does the work require people to clock in at 8 a.m. and clock out at 5 p.m.? If it doesn't, why are we not giving people the flexibility to work on their own time? We are all affected by the pandemic in various ways that may not be visible to the eye. This includes being parents, being caretakers, and general health. It may not feel fair, but we need to remember empathy and equity. Equity is not the same as fairness. If someone is affected by the pandemic and they need individual accommodation, I don't think it is unfair. The unfairness I see is they are unfortunately affected by the pandemic when I have the privilege to be unaffected. At the end of the day, as a person. I want to see others healthy and happy, not miserable and stressed. Because if they are stressed, things are not getting done and it may affect me too. We don't give each other enough credibility to be understanding. We overthink fairness and try to blanket it for everyone. But fairness is not the same as equity. Think about going to a buffet and the pricing. Why are kids being charged less than adults? Is that fair? I wouldn't say that is fairness, but it is reasonable and equitable. Kids don't eat as much, thus why should they be charged the same price as adults? Some things that are unfair can still be equitable though. Don't overthink, don't think about fairness, think about equity. Be open to being compassionate and individualizing structures for different needs. A part of individualizing structure is communicating expectations. Since life will be uncertain for a while, we should gather all the things we are working on and talk to our supervisor or our team and agree upon a timeline. When do things need to get done? Does the timeline take into consideration people's time off and buffer room to anticipate any hiccups? This strategy helps avoid overburdening others and opening opportunities for communication. One thing I always try to do before starting any new work is asking team members to contribute to a timeline. What timeline do we find is realistic for them? Did I share what timeline expectations based on the larger picture of needs? If the timeline don't match, we should talk about it to see what are the concerns and if we need to reprioritize our projects and tasks to make room for another one. I'm going to take a moment right now to give us all a moment to breathe and troubleshoot some technology issues, as I can see it popping up on the chat that on my end it's not being very well heard. So give me one moment, please.
And while we're working on that, I would ask you all to just take a few moments, maybe close your eyes and just take a couple deep breaths to relax and just to be in the moment with all of us. You're muted. I'm not sure if you're trying to talk. All right, let me just take over this part of the script for a second and of the presentation since we're having the technological issues. So think about the time before the pandemic when we were all working in person. Remember what your average day was like. How did your morning start? What about lunch? How did you end your afternoons? I hope while you were remembering the times in the office, you recalled moments of connecting with coworkers throughout the day. Unless you are a robot or machine-like alien, you probably were not working 4 hours nonstop, took an hour lunch break, then again worked for the next 4 hours. Realistically, when we were working in the office, we had casual conversation with colleagues all the time. We took walking breaks in between meetings, mental breaks while working on tasks. So what makes it different than now? We don't have the same colleagues. Some of our colleagues have changed into kids, pets, significant others, roommates, family members. Our new colleagues might even require support and help or be a huge distraction in comparison to our pre-pandemic colleagues. But besides that, it isn't that different. We are still doing the same work, just in a more stressful environment. So taking the new situation into consideration, remind people, including yourself, to be human and take breaks. Schedule breaks on your calendar if you are bad at remembering them. Just because we are working from home doesn't mean we should be working more. The US is built on capitalism that bleeds into all parts of our lives. We want you to be kind to yourselves and others during this distressing time. Don't pressure or feel pressure to produce. A lot of uncertainty is happening. So another way to avoid burnout is team bonding and communication. I would like you all to take a moment and think about the idea of too many meetings and zoomed out. Are we zoomed out because there are too many meetings? Or are we zoomed out because there are too many work meetings? Earlier, I asked you all to imagine what your average day is like in the office. Hopefully, you remembered the downtime you have in an office space where you can casually catch up with your coworkers. Today, we are living in a world where most people are working remotely and connecting virtually. When we think about virtual environments, we think about connecting with others through text messages. Not often do we think about creating a space for us to gather together and hang out. This seems counterintuitive. Our capitalistic instinct makes us feel like we are not being productive or using our time wisely, thus we shouldn't do it. I'm going to pass it back to Liz. Thank you for your patience.
Hello, hopefully everyone can hear me okay. I don't know. Yes, okay. Sorry about that. Thank you for your patience on that. And thank you, Christina, for jumping in and taking over to continue the presentation. So picking up where we left off from what Christina was saying, our capitalistic instincts makes us feel like we're not being productive or using our time wisely, thus we shouldn't do it. But why should we not do it? When we work together in an office, we give ourselves time to connect with others. So why not in a remote environment? I don't think we are zoomed out from too many meetings. How I see it is we are zoomed out from work-specific meetings. We are social creatures. We want an opportunity to connect with others. Therefore, we should create that opportunity. What has been working well for my team is scheduling an informal catch-up, de-stress, derail meetings. The meetings have no agenda and are not mandatory. I make sure to emphasize to my team that they are never obligated to show up for any of these meetings. I set up a reoccurring Zoom meeting every Tuesdays and Thursdays for 30 minutes at the end of the day. I also set up one every other Wednesday midday to include our student worker. What their time doesn't really matter. It is the concept of a non-working meeting. This seems odd at first, and let me tell you, it felt awkward scheduling that for the team. I kept wondering to myself, am I overthinking the team's needs? Am I forcing something upon them when they don't want it? And because of my power dynamic, they don't know how to tell me it's a bad idea? But after 2 weeks of doing it, the team shared their appreciation of the space. On some days, they even look forward to it. After long days of work and no other chance to just chat casually, the space created was an opportunity for it. We've been doing this informal derail catch-up meetings since April, and I say it is a success. It helps boost team morale and make us feel human and more lively. Another tip that can help build bonding and communication is doing check-ins, especially in a time where we don't have the formal walk-by check-ins anymore. Scheduling these check-ins with your team. Think about the cadence of it and always let individuals have the option to opt out. What I find works best for my team is bi-weekly check-ins with each individual where they can feel safe and comfortable to share with me what's on their mind, whether it relates to work or not. Similar to the scheduled informal meetings, this meeting also has no agenda. I let my team members lead the discussion. If there's no discussion, I would prompt them by asking how work is going and how life is. The meetings vary from 15 minutes to an hour. For a class setting, both the informal scheduled Zoom session and check-ins can be helpful.
When we first shifted to remote teaching and learning, I made myself available once a week for an hour to ensure an opportunity for students to drop by if they had questions. Students may not take you up on the opportunity, but trust me that they feel comfortable knowing that there is that opportunity. I've also learned that it is helpful to start the semester with having students schedule a 15-minute get to know each other with the instructor. It makes them feel more comfortable with you and able to talk to you more freely. The last thing I want to briefly share with you all is communication tools. Since we don't have a lot of time to go into the technical details of using these tools and how to use them, we encourage you to check the website for resources. If you aren't already using one, you should consider having a unit-wide communication tool where groups and/or channels are organized for easy communication. On this slide, I have listed a few that I've experienced using in formal and informal settings: Microsoft Teams, Slack, and Discord. Each of these tools essentially do the same thing with their structure in organizing channel topics for discussion. It is really a choice of preference on interface and different additional features in my have. My unit uses Slack. I use Discord for community activities and have heard it being used in courses. I've also used Microsoft Teams to cross-communicate with other UA units. Now I'll hand it over to Christina to share her experience using Microsoft Teams and how to communicate effectively.
Thank you. And thank you everyone for the links in chat. This is great. I want to talk briefly about effective communication. To give you an idea of where I'm coming from, as an undergrad, I was the lab manager for an online research lab, mostly undergraduate students from UA South, now CAST. The job involved leading meetings, teaching the other students how to do research, answering their questions, and making sure our goals were reached. At the same time, I was interning for the organizational leadership program, working on many of their classes and learning about leadership from osmosis while practicing the things I learned directly in the lab. Also, when I worked in the Target warehouse, they had a philosophy of leadership that's always stuck with me. Leaders remove obstacles for their team. Everything we cover in this workshop can be simplified to this principle, and the best leaders I've ever had have followed this, even if they weren't explicit about it. So, how do you remove obstacles through communication? Liz has shared ways to bond as a team, which is a great way to build the trust you need to work well together and to make communication smoother. So to build on and continue that trust, let's talk about the most exciting part of work, meetings. Sorry, sometimes you need to have official work meetings with your team. How do you make these meetings worthwhile, engaging, and effective? We have several articles on the website about this, but to summarize a few key things: agendas that start with "how are things" and some time to just be together as humans. Share the agenda before the meeting and mark items that you need to talk about versus optional items. And plan ways to continue the conversation outside of the meeting. I'm sure you've all found that things seem to take longer in Zoom somehow, even when we don't have tech issues. And adding this asynchronous communication gives people a chance to express themselves fully, even if they don't typically speak up in meetings or have time to talk. This works in classrooms as well, as many instructors found themselves hearing from more students this spring because they switched from discussions in person to online discussions. So plan for meetings and then have a way to chat about them as a team afterwards. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the tool Teams, Microsoft Teams specifically for this, because we've been using that heavily on the D2L team, which I do not lead, and I want to share some things that have worked well. We have one team space for our entire team of 6, and we're logged into that every day for work, using the desktop app and turning on notifications so we keep on track. This helps us mimic the closeness of our in-person setup, but a little better. Now when someone has a question, we all get to learn the answer. We use the post page most regularly, starting new conversations for each topic so we can keep things legible. This is pretty low stress. There's no expectation that you answer immediately, but we're all chatting most of the day about how things are going, fun bugs we found, fixes we figured out. I would recommend finding and setting up a space like this, just one if possible, so that people have a one-stop shop for staying in touch. It even works when you have different schedules, because you can pop into any conversation at any time. And since the conversations are always going, it's easy to talk about team meetings after the meeting time is over and keep that conversation going until we've all been able to participate. We've also hired and are currently onboarding a new team member completely online. Teams lets her watch how we communicate and ask questions before she jumps in. And our team meetings, which are in Teams via video chat, are easy to join even as a new person. You just click join. For complicated questions, we've also started opening up video chats in Teams directly, open to the whole team, because it's often faster to ask out loud than it is to type. You don't have to join. There's just a button if you want to or have time. And we usually briefly summarize the text of our question so that people know what we're asking. Whatever tool you choose to use, remember these tips and be forgiving with yourself just as you are with your team members. Mistakes happen, communication goes awry, but it's how we handle the apology and change afterwards that really counts. And when you show your team that mistakes are okay and that it's good to share them, you give everyone a little bit of breathing room that can be so meaningful right now. So I want to pass that back to Liz.
After listening to us go on and on about communication and breathing space, let's take a short break and have you all engage with us. We will be using an application called Mentimeters for this activity. On the next slide, there will be directions on how to access Mentimeters. Once you get to the participation page, there will be a question that we are asking you to reflect and respond. There are 3 ways you can access the app to participate with us. Use your mobile device to scan the QR code that will launch you to the web page. You can go to menti.com and type in the code. Or finally, you can click on the link provided to you via Zoom chat. We will be sharing your responses on screen.
I love how many people are using Teams already. This is great. I wonder if you have any tips for using it, how it's working well in your team, if you would share those in chat or in the Menti.
I like that someone's looking at doing non-working meetings. That's always my favorite thing to do.
Ooh, Trello. Trello is also a fun tool. We use that for our reference space so we can all access the same information and also as a to-do. So we will be sharing the Menti responses on the website afterwards. So just make sure you keep that website link handy or save it. We can also send it out with the post survey if we can. But go ahead and please feel free to keep adding your answers. As we go, we're just going to continue because we're running a little short on time. I want to talk, so before we do this, let's take a moment to breathe and relax. We're going through a lot of information today, and it's important that we model taking breaks to let our minds process. Close your eyes if it helps. Concentrate on your breathing for a few moments of peace. And feel free to keep breathing because you don't have to present. I wanted to preface this part with sharing that my lens as a white cisgender woman is the lens of an ally, so I really welcome feedback, corrections, more links in chat, more information in chat. My goal here is to share some practical steps from the wealth of books and articles out there about both whiteness and anti-racism. I know many of us have been in a reading and learning stage for a lot of this year, and I hope you've had some time to learn, but we need to take actual steps towards making the workplace better for everyone, or all that learning really isn't doing any good. Part of anti-racism is understanding the structure of whiteness and white supremacy, which is where racist beliefs and structures come from. I found these 3 infographics to be really helpful as reminders of how baked into our ideas of professionalism, work ethics, and power these things are. I'm not going to read through all of them, but I want to thank Tima Okun and Kenneth Jones for the research, which you can find links to on our website, as well as Sylvia Duckworth for making these beautiful infographics. Most relevant to our presentation today are numbers 1, 2, 4, and 10. The amount of work we do, how perfect it is, and how fast it gets done are not the most important things. What is important is reaching goals that impact people in a positive way while taking care of ourselves and our colleagues. And number 10 is especially important because one obstacle that is really, really important for you to remove is racism, whether it's microaggressions, outright bigotry, or something in between. And that's going to involve some level of conflict. So let's take a look at the last 5 characteristics. Let's talk about number 15, the right to comfort. This is connected to avoiding conflict. People who are not directly impacted by racism don't want to talk about it because that's difficult. People who have to deal with racism may not want to talk about it either because they know the likely responses are gaslighting or, again, talking about how this isn't comfortable. Racism is a huge obstacle to any team at any
I'll be
point.
back.
Thanks. Racism is so bad that research shows us that it affects health negatively both for the people affected and for their children and grandchildren. That's not something that leaders can ignore no matter what level you are and how much power you have. So you have the ability to make an anti-racist space at least within your team. And if there's anyone here who has the ability to make larger changes, please take what we're sharing and the wealth of information that's out there and apply it so that your organization and the leaders within it below you can have your full support to do this. So I wanted to give you 3 steps you can take starting now. And again, I welcome more and more feedback on this and more steps that people think are useful. If you don't know what microaggressions are, or you're not sure you'd recognize them, read up on those. We have some resources on the website that will share some examples and ways to respond. These are small, relatively easy things to stop because you can address the impact, not the intent. If you can clear your workplace from microaggressions, you make it easier for people to work without needing to be on edge. Have a plan for what you'll do when you hear or see them, because it's easy to freeze up in the moment, I know. Teach your team about them and make it a positive thing to let people know. Just like you would say, hey, that's not the way you want to do this because try this instead. When someone makes a work mistake, make this part of your culture where everyone works together to get better and something that doesn't rely on the person who is affected to let people know every time. Step 2 is acknowledge the trauma that has been happening all year. Most recently, with the verdict in the Breonna Taylor case, the blatant statements of the president in the debate. It doesn't have to be long or detailed, but be empathetic and give your whole team some time and space where they can process their thoughts and feelings. We know that our emotions and thoughts are not things that can be separated out because, again, we're not robots. So give people the flexibility to deal with things and don't expect them to be able to jump into work as if nothing happened. Finally, think about these 15 characteristics and your work culture. They are shared on the website. Are there things you can change that rely on these truths? What are your focuses as a team? And what could you improve? Is your workplace a place where everyone is treated equitably, not fairly? And if not, why? So let's take one more deep breath before we continue. All right, I want to close with some psychology of happiness. One of the proven methods to make yourself happier is practicing active gratefulness. Finding people to thank genuinely for ways they've helped you or made your life easier is not only an amazing thing to do, especially if you tell them and their boss, but it boosts your happiness. So this year, let's try spreading gratefulness as a habit, whether it's letting people know how amazing your team is or praising and thanking other teams or individuals. All right, so that was a lot of information. I'm seeing some good comments in chat that I really like. Thank you for sharing. Let's take one final break. We are out of time, so we did want to answer any questions you have, but since our time is up here, we've set up a separate informal Zoom room if you want to continue talking about this. There's an evaluation in the chat, and we're going to share this Zoom link. If you want to come and just chat with me and Liz about any of these topics, we'll be there until 1 o'clock. So thank you everyone for participating, for your comments, for your feedback, and we hope to see you in maybe a few minutes.